Hello friends, this is Teacher Harrison here. We're going to go over these past modal forms and how to pronounce them naturally. I've written the contracted forms here. These are not necessarily written this way. Sometimes they are, like in texts or something like this, but not so much in formal writing. But we still read them in a contracted way. So instead of, she could have been in an accident, I promise no native speaker of English will read it that way. They'll say, she could have been in an accident. Could have. Or maybe if they're really lazy, she could have been in an accident. Okay? Could have been. Instead of he might have been, he might have been. He might have been stuck in traffic. He might have been stuck in traffic. Might have been. Okay, again, if they're lazy, he might have been stuck in traffic. You'll also hear that. You should have been there would be, you should have been. You should have been there. Okay? Or you should have been there again. You should have been. Should have been. You should have been there. There must have been is must have been. There must have been. There must have been some problem, and that's why he's late. There must have been some problem, and that's why he's late. Or there must have been. There must have been some problem, and that's why he's late. Okay? Again, you might not distinctly hear this V sound. It sort of depends. There may have been is there may have been. Be careful that you don't say mave, which is a name in English, but may have. So it almost sounds like may of, right? But it's together, so you hear this little sound in between, may have. There may have been extenuating circumstances. There may have been. There may have been extenuating circumstances. Okay? Let's look down here at the negatives. So instead of he could not have been, we're going to say, most naturally, we'll say, he couldn't have been. He couldn't have been at that party because I looked everywhere and didn't see him. He couldn't have been at that party because I looked everywhere and didn't see him. Okay? If we're really strongly emphasizing this sentence, we might say, he could not have. He could not have been at that party because I looked everywhere and didn't see him. He could not have been there. Okay, so either he couldn't have been or he could not have been. Okay? You might not have been is going to contract to you might not have been. We really don't have a completely contracted form. We don't say mightn't have been or something like that. It doesn't exist. We say you might not have been, you might not have been. Okay? You might not have been the best choice, and that's why the boss didn't choose you. You might not have been. You might not have been the best choice. Here we're back to the this kind of form, right? Shouldn't have been. So you shouldn't have been given that award. You don't deserve it. You shouldn't have been given that award. You don't deserve it. Shouldn't have been. Or again, if we're really strongly emphasizing it, you should not have been given that award. You should not have been given that award. You don't deserve it. Some people with this one find it a little bit hard because they're really strongly pronouncing this D. The same with could. I hear people say shouldn't have been and couldn't have been, right? It's really not strongly emphasized. It's more important to emphasize the N. So if you need to make a choice between the two, shouldn't have is fine. You don't really need to pronounce this D sound, okay? Same with could. Couldn't have. You don't really need to pronounce the D. the D sound and the N sound are in the same place in your mouth. When you make a D, duh, it's behind your teeth, not touching them. And when you make an N, it's in the same place. Na, da, na, da, na. So couldn't, you put your tongue in the place for both the D and the N sound. So it's not very distinct, okay? Next one, he isn't here. He must not have been invited. He must not have been. Again, we contract not and have, not have, or nada, right? If we're not speaking very distinctly. He must not have been invited. He must not have been invited, okay? Last one, may not have. Again, we just contract not have. So you may not have been given a lot of opportunities in life, but you made the most of the ones you were given. You may not have been, or you may not have been. You may not have been given, okay? All right, well, I hope that helps you. Have a good day. Keep practicing.